Welcome to Public Health on Call, a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where we bring evidence, experience, and perspective to make sense of today's leading health challenges. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes.
This is Lindsay Smith Rogers. Why are there so many deadly car crashes in the U.S.? One reason appears to be modern street design, more specifically, the oversized travel lanes we see on many American roads. Today, Stephanie Desmond talks to Shima Hamidi, a transportation researcher at Johns Hopkins, about a new report from the Bloomberg American Health Initiative about how something that was meant to make driving easier could actually be making it more dangerous, and what could be done to make streets safer and more environmentally friendly at the same time. Let's listen.
Shima Hamidi, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So today we're going to talk about transportation and public health, and specifically a new report that you have led at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Tell me what it's about.
Sure. So it's about this long-lasting belief that wider lanes and wider streets are safer. And that has come with lots of consequences, public health consequences, transportation consequences. We are testing this hypothesis that are wider lanes safer? Can we narrow lanes, travel lanes, to make more room for pedestrians and cyclists? And really, what are the best way of using our existing space within the transportation network?
So wide lanes, people think are safer because you're not going to hit the car next to you and those kinds of things?
Yeah, like it's, this the whole idea behind the transportation street design in the US is that it's designed to facilitate fast and convenient driving. So by safe, meaning that drivers have more room to make mistake. And so it's probably is going to make traffic accidents less likely. And so we wanted to test this, because that's really what's been the foundation for what you see as street design in the US right now. All of these wide streets, all of these streets that are dominantly designed for cars. It's like a constant war between pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. And drivers are always the winners of this war. You see, most of our cities have very, very little portion of their streets have bike lane or wide sidewalks. And so, we wanted to test this and see what's the truth, what the data says.
And what did it say?
Well, we did a national study covering more than 1,100 streets from 7 cities in the US, covering more than 21 street design factors plus lane widths, and tested the relationship between them and safety indicators like the number of crashes. I should say that this is the first time that you see a national study on lane widths and safety. And so what we found was that when you compare 9-foot, 10, 11, and 11-foot lanes, there is no difference in terms of the number of crashes. They are kind of the same. Wider lanes are not safer. But when you move to 12-foot lane and compare that with 9 and 10, you see that it actually is more dangerous. The number of crashes in streets with 12-foot lanes significantly higher than 9-foot and 10-foot lanes. And so what we found is quite opposite of the general belief and, what has been the foundation for street design and lane width guidelines. We also broke it down by speed, and we found that in lower speeds, 20 to 25 miles per hour, again, the same thing. You don't see any difference when you make the lanes wider. When you move to 35 miles per hour, actually, again, wider lanes become significantly more dangerous, having a higher number of crashes. And so really the explanation for this is that wider lanes don't give more room to mistake. for drivers. They just make drivers drive faster. And that is actually could be a cause for increased accidents and increased risk of accidents in the streets.
Well, that's so interesting. That 1 foot really makes a real difference in terms of the safety.
So 1 foot or 2 foot. And that 1 or 2 foot actually are going to make a difference between a street having a bike lane or not. If you think of a street with 4 lanes and you think of 1 and 1.5 foot of lane width reduction, that's the space you need to create a bike lane. Or for streets that don't have a sidewalk, that's exactly the space that you need to make a wider sidewalk. So within this existing street infrastructure, where you see it's so built up, like in East Coast particularly, that's really going to be a difference between how you are going to plan for a bike lane, how you are going to accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians in the street without sacrificing safety. In most cases, actually improving safety.
Is there also a factor that if you have a bike lane, are people more careful about how fast they drive? Is that a factor here?
There is. So we call it conflicts on the street and drivers. So here is the point. You're actually making a great point. Drivers are less concerned about the speed limit and more concerned about what the context of street determines their the driving speed. So in other words, the streets that are busier have tree, lots of people are around, lots of pedestrians, there's a bike lane, bikes on the streets. Drivers feel less safe to drive fast, and they are going to be driving slower regardless of the speed limit. And that's where you see also lane widths playing a role. In this kind of context, you definitely have room to make streets narrower without sacrificing safety.
So are you hoping that lanes will be built narrower? Are you hoping that current wide lane roads will be retrofitted? What is your goal here?
Great question. I think both of them. I think for the existing lanes, and in many cities, we have lanes that are way wider than what they should be. The minimum lane width standard in the US is 11 foot. In Europe is 7 to 8. And so this is really how much you have room to narrow. So in the report, we came out with the best and most immediate street candidates for lane width reduction projects. And that could be something that cities can take a look and consider lane width reduction and adding bike lane and sidewalk. We also have recommendations for revising lane widths and street design guideline standards. Basically, recommending cities and states departments of transportation that in low-speed streets, instead of starting with 11 foot and having their designing and traffic engineers justify why it should be narrower, that's the practice right now in the US. Start with 10 and have their engineers justify why it needs to be wider. In most cases, it shouldn't. In some cases, it should, but in most cases, it shouldn't.
So this really sort of highlights a link between public health and the built environment. It seems like a perfect example. Could you talk to me about the public health ramifications?
Absolutely. So first of all, traffic fatalities is the leading cause of death in the US for people aged 1 to 54. And US has one of the highest traffic fatality rates among developing countries. I'm talking about 11.6 deaths per 100,000 population in the US versus 1.3 to 3.2 in European countries. Like, you can see the difference. A big part of that is because of difference in cycling and pedestrian infrastructure. We don't have good sidewalk. We don't have good bike lanes. We don't support biking and cycling. By adding these bike lanes and sidewalks, you're going to go toward zero fatality goal. That's the goal of many cities and states when it comes to traffic safety. The other important public health consideration is that adding infrastructure and facilities for pedestrians and cyclists will help them to come to the streets, use this space, and we will see more physical activity and less likelihood of obesity and other chronic diseases. COVID-19 pandemic was a big proof to this when cities had to close many streets to cars and made them pedestrian friendly. And you see thousands of pedestrians came to street and used that space. We literally can make that a model and use that in American cities even after the pandemic. I also want to mention about climate change and environmental impacts. Narrower lanes and narrower streets means less impervious surface, more environmental friendly built environment and transportation, and more cost efficient. That's going to be way cheaper for states, departments of transportation and cities to do this than to find other ways to add bike lanes and sidewalks. And so both in terms of climate change, in terms of environment, in terms of public health, transportation, all of those will add up to the benefits of narrower lanes rather than wider street designs.
Do you think it's going to be hard to convince people that this is the way to go? Because I feel like in America, bigger is better, right?
Of course. And that has been the practice for decades. We've talked with several states' departments of transportation, and they have this fear of liability. What if we make streets narrower and there's a liability of increased accidents? So this study provides evidence, a national evidence, something that's generalizable to other cities in the US, that wider is not safer. In most cases, is more dangerous. So we hope this will pave the road and help departments of transportation, DOTs, to really look at the data and make more informed decisions about what is the best and optimal lane widths in their city.
Seema Hamidi, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Public Health on Call is a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, produced by Joshua Sharfstein, Lindsay Smith-Rogers, and Stephanie Desmond. Audio production by J.B. Arbogast, Holly Cardinale, Philip Porter, Spencer Greer, and Matthew Martin, with support from Chip Hickey. Distribution by Nick Moran. Production support from Catherine Ricardo. Social media run by Grace Fernandez and Shian Briscoe. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes. Thank you for listening.